guys, it's Joey for Witches of the Moon. I am your Tuesday host, and this week's topic is paganism and relationships. I was going to be on camera this week, but I went to visit my sister. She had a cold and now I've got it. So I'm a lovely shade of pink. So I thought we would stick with the format we've been going with, and maybe I'll be on camera next week. So the format I've chosen, me, myself and I, me and the voices, is citrine on one side and amethyst on the other, and that's because the main focus, I believe, of this topic is actually romantic relationships and paganism, and then the goddess and a symbol of balance and all the elements in balance, the pentacle, both of which were from the lovely Trina. Mwah! Okay. Oh dear. I've got a funny old mood on today, I'm telling you. Right, so paganism and relationships. It's interesting, I suppose, that when I saw this topic, and the picture confirmed it for me, it was the initial thought was of romantic relationships, and I stopped and thought about it. I was like, is it just romantic relationships, or is this just relationships in general? And I thought it's probably easier to focus on romantic relationships and paganism. I think romantic relationships with regards to your spiritual path is hugely dependent on whether or not you're vocal and perhaps out of the closet with your spiritual beliefs. If you're surrounded in an environment where everybody is of a differing religious belief and you can't really say what you are, embrace what you are on a social scale, then it becomes very difficult to have relationships because you can't honestly say what path you want to follow. I have not had this issue, so I don't feel that I can fully discuss it properly because it's not something that's ever happened to me, really. I've suffered discrimination here and there, and once or twice by people in relationships, and I will share those experiences with you for the sake of the video and sharing experiences and helping others perhaps. But in regards to not being allowed to follow a particular path, I've not had that experience. I've had disapproval, I've had some interesting comments, but I've not had full-on being ostracised for what I believe in. I'm quite out there, quite open about it, and I'm quite strong about it as well, and I'm at a point now where that won't change, and nobody in a relationship is going to tell me what I can and cannot believe, because that's who I am. And I don't feel that the relationship would be balanced in love and respect if someone did try to tell me what I should or should not believe. That would be more about control than love, and as part of a positive, balanced, loving relationship, it is my personal belief that the other person should support the other person's religious and spiritual beliefs, as long as they're not harming others or themselves, which is when it gets into murky waters, of course. So for me, I've dated one guy who was Christian, and he knew I was inclined to the pagan ways, but he didn't come off as being overtly Christian to me for most of our life, until we got to the point where one day he said to me that he didn't want our kids being brought up pagan. I said to him, I don't want our kids being brought up anything. I want them to discover what they want for themselves, which was more or less what he was going on about. His parents were very Christian, so they didn't know, and he thought it was a phase I was going to get over. He sort of addressed it as, you've used this to get through some of the horrifying times in your life, but you've got me now, so you don't need it. And that was kind of horrifying to me in itself. You don't need a spiritual path because you have me. And that was like, oh, that's not good. And the problem is there are very few obviously men in my life, that get under my skin, and you love them forever, or whether you like it or not, and they can always get to you, and that doesn't happen to me very often. And he was the first guy to ever get under my skin. And I got under his skin as well. I mean, you know, it's one of those relationships. So it wasn't as easy as, you know, him having a problem with my spirituality and then getting out of the relationship. Obviously the relationship is no longer. And that was one of the things that drove the relationship to pieces, because it's like, you want me to change a part of who I consider myself to be, my spiritual freedom, because you don't agree with it. So that in itself didn't destroy the relationship. There were many other factors. He wasn't supportive in other ways, as you can probably imagine from that. And that was the end of it. Painfully drawn out. And that was one. Everyone else that I've really addressed it to, I don't think I've had that many serious relationships that, I mean, you think they're serious when you're there, but when you look back at it, you know that really they weren't. So it didn't really have a huge impact in the ones that weren't. And then most people since then have been live and let live. Like, they don't particularly follow it, they may or may not believe it, but they respect me enough to leave me to it. And I guess that's maybe the kind of relationships that I'm drawn to most of the time, are live and let live type guys. I can't think of anything else, anybody else that was any, you know, no one else has really been bothered. And maybe I've got lucky in this respect. I've never actually dated a pagan guy, oddly enough. My sister had, and he wasn't really pagan, he just was using it to control women, like younger women. I've seen that happen a lot to younger women. Now the girls I have seen controlled by men who are using spirituality as a means of controlling them are younger, often by older guys, and often the ones I've seen are gothic. That's not to say that all goth guys are like that, because I don't believe that at all. I've met some really nice goth guys, but it tends to be like the older, really quite a bit older ones who sort of go for younger women, and then they into the spiritual side of things to sort of cement their power. I've seen that happen. That's not to brush anybody with the same, it's not to tar anyone with the same brush, sorry. But I've seen that happen a couple of times, a few times actually. It's kind of sad. Just because maybe that's groups I've seen. I'm sure it must happen within all groups. But I've never technically dated a pagan guy. Ever. No, never. So I really can't, I can't really say what that's like. At all. I have no idea. I just get left to it most of the time. Yeah, whatever, go on, go ahead, I'll be in here. I'll have the dinner, whatever we're having for whichever ritual feast it is. Well, what are we having for that? That'll be nice. Yeah, that's about as far as it's ever gone with me. Like, okay, so what food are we having for the celebration? Something tasty. Although every guy I've ever been with has had to be very understanding with my Samhain Halloween decorations. It's coming, it's coming. Because obviously I have a lot of Halloween decorations, and I tend to get people involved in Halloween when I'm in groups of people, which I haven't been in groups of people for a while. It's been like, well, I'll do everything, you just have to show up, and people are like, okay then, if we get fed. But as for, you know, spirituality and relationships, it's just my core belief in any relationship that respect and freedom of expression and belief and love are based, real love is based on mutual understanding. You don't have to agree, and in any relationship there will be points of disagreement, and that's fine, but then compromise and mutual understanding and respect are the foundations of any solid relationship. And that can be true of any relationship, be it romantic or not. People should respect your boundaries, respect your spirituality. If they're interested, they can, try and approach it maybe, but the problems a lot of the time come from when people sort of don't want to know and take a really negative spin on it. And I've had that with family members. My mother had the comment, oh, well, paganism must be evil because you have an altar. And I turned around and looked at her and went, so do Catholics. So do a lot of spiritual paths. But I don't really feel that it necessarily needs to overshadow what a relationship is either. As long as you have respect, I don't see that a spiritual path needs to directly affect a relationship at all. If the person doesn't believe, then they should allow the fact that you believe and not try and change you, and you should allow the fact that they don't believe and not try to change them, because trying to change anybody in any relationship is a really negative thing to be doing in any situation, which is not harmful to the person or others. That's when it becomes something else, obviously. So I think that's about all that I can really say with regards to religion and relationships. I really don't think it should impact a relationship that is loving and strong. I've never experienced it worse than I've mentioned, and obviously that relationship was lacking in support in all areas, so not just one, and it didn't survive, which I think says all you need to know. So that's it for me for this week. Many blessings.